3 spine-chilling Airbnb nightmares, unexplained terrors revealed, cursed experiences exposed. It started like any typical getaway, a quaint little Airbnb tucked away in a perfectly manicured suburb. Sarah and Mark entered with hearts full of dreams, vowing to escape the grinding city life. But as they crossed the threshold, their excitement twisted into tension. The walls whispered secrets as the air thickened. Something was off. Strange family photographs lined the walls, eyes too vivid, too knowing. A smile plastered on every face, yet they felt like they were grinning at secrets best left unspoken. But Sarah's gaze landed on the locked attic door, her curiosity clawing at her as she wondered what lay behind it. The sunset's glow seemed to dim as dusk crept in, turning the cheery home into an eerie mask hiding something terrible. A neighbor's indifferent glance met them at the corner. "You guys new here? Be careful, the last guests didn't leave as they came," he muttered. What did that mean? Sarah's heart raced, a cold sweat trickled down her back. Mark shrugged it off, chuckling, "Just old city paranoia, babe." But as he stroked her hand, their connection waned, overshadowed by a growing unease. Each tick of the clock echoed ominously, reminding her they were nothing more than intruders in a community stained with whispers of the past. The dark tales came spilling out in bits, rumors of previous renters disappearing, leaving behind only empty suitcases, abandoned dreams. The walls felt closer, as if they too shared in the neighborhood's heavy secret. Each creak of the floorboard sent Sarah's breath hitching in her throat, while Mark insisted it was merely old pipes echoing. But she felt the air prick with tension, a room filled with a malicious presence lurking just outside their senses. As they walked hand in hand, the neighborhood loomed, cookie-cutter homes forming unyielding walls around them. Grins from the locals turned into sinister smirks. Shadows flickered at the edges of her vision. Did the figures watching them have skin pulled tight over bones? Panic gnawed at her mind, but Mark's laughter echoed into the unsettling night, a fragile shield against encroaching madness. When night completely fell, a deep, oppressive silence settled. Like a fog swallowing them whole, Sarah felt a heavy, almost suffocating pressure wash over her. It wasn't just the darkness, they were not alone anymore. Something moved in the corners, an entity drawing with whispered threats, a phantom only she could feel. Heart racing, she was glued to the spot, while Mark started locking doors, turning frantic. "Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let us continue. The attic door creaked open, releasing a wave of cold air. A figure draped in shadow hovered just inside the threshold, exuding an ancient power that seemed to draw on their very fears. The walls pulsated, as if alive, tempting them to learn the truth. Each step back they took into the small living room felt futile as dread blossomed heavily around them. What haunted this home, welcoming yet chilling? A sickening realization loomed. Would they be drawn into its tale of horror? As the darkness deepened, the couple stood, frozen, caught between the warmth of their love and the chilling embrace of a nightmare unraveling. Would they face the ghosts hidden in this suburban trap, or would they become its next hollow remnants? The air hung thick with an icy sensation as the shadowed figure moved closer, a silhouette stretching and warping against the dim light of an old lamp. Sarah squeezed Mark's hand, their fingers intertwined, a fragile lifeline in the unraveling chaos. Every instinct screamed to flee, to break free of this maleficent grasp, but their bodies betrayed them. Who are you?" Mark stammered, his voice barely rising above a whisper. The figure didn't answer. Instead, it took another step forward, revealing itself not as a single entity, but as a swirling mass of lost souls, faces morphing and merging, mouths opening in silent screams. Sarah's heart raced, the pounding noise echoing in her ears like war drums. We have to go, Mark. Now. She tugged at his arm, but he stood rooted to the spot, drawn in by the mournful wails resonating from the figure, a haunting melody that wrapped around him like a shroud. Listen to them, he murmured, entranced. They need us. Need us for what? Panic surged through her, a fierce tide against the weight of dread pressing upon them. The creature's whispers filled her mind, tales of despair and abandonment crawled through her thoughts. The last guests didn't leave as they came, that grim warning reverberated in her head. Suddenly, the air turned frigid, squeezing the warmth from their bodies. It felt as if the house itself inhaled, preparing for something sinister. The photographs, those predatory smiles plastered across the walls, seemed to turn, the frames shuddering as if alive. Their eyes bore into her, laughter mixed with cries, and dread pooled in her stomach. Mark! Her scream sliced through the silence. Get away from it! With a violent jerk, he snapped out of his trance. What have I done? His eyes widened with terror. They bolted towards the front door, but it slammed shut with a sound reminiscent of thunder. The walls shuddered, shaking, and a low growl rippled through the air. The foundation trembled as if the house itself was coming alive, trying to consume them. Panic clawed at Sarah's throat as they spun around, searching for an exit. The room seemed to close in. Shadows twisted unnaturally, reaching with desperate hands that wanted to drag them back. Go to the attic! She shouted, remembering the locked door that had beckoned her curiosity. It had promised answers, or perhaps an escape, a way to uncover the house's dark history. As their feet pounded against the aged wooden floor, the attic door stood ajar, an inviting maw yawning open to the darkness within. Mark hesitated, glancing back at the looming shadows. What if it's worse? Better than this? She grabbed his arm, pulling him through the door. Dread settled in the pit of her stomach as they stepped inside. The air was musty, thick with the scent of decay. Dim light trickled in through a cracked window, illuminating the attic's contents, a jumble of old furniture, a dusty trunk, and cobwebs that danced with unseen movement. But it was the wall that caught Sarah's attention. An intricate mural painted in muted colors depicted a family, their faces eerily similar to the ones in the photographs below. And it was not just the faces, the joys of their lives fractured, their eyes not filled with merriment but with a hollow longing. An unsettling chill skittered down her spine. Sarah Mark's voice quavered. What? I think we're not alone. In that moment, a soft, resonating giggle echoed through the attic, chilling their hearts. The laughter carried innocence twisted into malice. It felt like fingers trailing across her skin, pulling her further into the darkness of the house. Mark backed away, but it was too late. The shadows lunged, and the whispers began again, low and rasping, a chorus of secrets begging to be uncovered. What do you want from us? Sarah yelled, scrambling for the light switch, but darkness engulfed them, the walls closing in as if the house itself breathed, hungry for more. She felt it, the weight of despair settling in, but she would not submit. Mark! Stay close. She felt him at her side, their love battling against the encroaching darkness, but doubt flickered like a candle, threatening to snuff out their resolve. The giggling escalated, morphing into cries, pleas for help mixed with warnings of doom. And then, in the thickening shadows, she saw it, a movement, distinct as a figure emerged from the darkness, its face obscured, yet its smile far too wide. Welcome home, it whispered. What did it mean? Their chance of escape was fading. Would Sarah and Mark be swallowed by the house or find a way to break its chains? The truth was just out of reach, waiting, hungering for its next prey. The darkness pressed in, thick and suffocating, as Sarah squinted at the figure silhouetted against the swirling shadows. Its wide grin felt predatory, each tooth glistening like the blade of a knife. Mark stood there, his breath hitching, eyes darting from the figure to the bleak corners of the attic. Who are you? Sarah gasped, her voice cracking with desperation. The figure leaned forward, stepping into the weak light that filtered through the cracked window. It was no longer just a shadow, it was a grotesque blend of faces, contorted with anguish, merging into an expression of pale delight. "I'm your guide," it hissed, the laughter still bubbling beneath its words. "Welcome to your worst memories." "Memories?" Mark echoed, confusion clouding his features. "What do you mean?" "Your stories are entwined with this place," the entity's voice slithered through the air. It sent chills racing down Sarah's spine. She felt the floorboards quiver beneath her feet, as if the house craved their fear. Suddenly, the laughter stopped, replaced by a cacophony of whispers. They surrounded her, each voice weaving a tale of loss, betrayal, and grief. Sarah clutched Mark's arm, feeling the warmth of his skin fade beneath the icy grip of terror. "Make it stop!" she shouted, but the words echoed back at her, swallowed whole by the shadows. With a sudden burst, Mark broke the silence. "You're lying. We will not become part of this." He stepped forward defiantly, but the noise only grew louder, drowning him out. The figure shifted, elongating menacingly toward Mark. "Defiance comes with a price," it said, flicking its tongue, which slithered like a serpent. The attic walls groaned as if hungry for blood, and an oppressive weight settled on their chests. Sarah clung harder to Mark, struggling against the suffocating fear. "We need to leave. Whatever it wants, we can't give it that." But the entity chuckled, a sound that echoed like broken glass. "Escape? Ah, but you're already bound by my threads, my little puppets." A shimmer flickered in its eyes. It was a flicker of something familiar. Something that drove a stake of recognition through Sarah's heart. She gasped. No, it can't be. "You're the reason they never left. It's all connected, dear Sarah," the figure cooed, its voice dripping with malicious glee. "Those guests you saw, they're part of the fabric here, just like you will be." Mark stiffened beside her. "What do we have to do?" "Just tell us." "Read the mural," the figure urged, its grin stretching impossibly wide, tongue darting like a snake. "Only through understanding your history can you hope to unravel your fate." Trembling, Sarah turned to the mural on the wall. The faces stared blankly, their eyes hollow yet filled with insurmountable sorrow. As she studied them, she felt her heartbeat quicken. Each figure was her family, her past, her heritage. The truth suppressed all these years bubbled up, threatening to drown her. "Mark," she whispered, her voice shaking, I don't remember it all." "It's okay," he whispered back, gripping her tightly. But a flutter of doubt crept into his voice. "What if the memories are what it wants us to uncover?" The figure laughed again, a dreadful sound. "Yes. The tragedies, the secrets long buried. Give in to them." The air seemed to vibrate with the pent-up energy of unresolved cries. The shadows danced around them, becoming a swirling tempest of despair, rage, and haunting memories. "Make it stop." Sarah yelled again, but the laughter returned, morphing into wails that shattered the silence, and then everything went dark. Sarah figured that they were losing, becoming part of the horror that engulfed them. But then she felt Mark's hand slipping, felt him pulled away. Sarah. His voice echoed, a desperate and pained gasp. "I want to let go." In that instant, the shadows rippled like water, and they were struck with an overwhelming realization: the only way out was through confronting the truth, embracing the darkness that defined them. Together. She cried above the cacophony. Just then, the figure surged forward, mouth stretching wide as if to consume them. Behind it, waves of memories flickered like a montage, beckoning with promises of truth mixed with anguish, all while Mark's grip began to falter. Would they unravel the horrors haunting them, or would they become lost in the shadows forever? The question loomed ominously as the darkness deepened, swirling like a storm ready to swallow them whole. The darkness engulfed Sarah and Mark, swallowing their voices, their fears, their very beings. Just when she felt Mark's grip slip away completely, she was yanked from the void. Brightness burst in, blinding her, and she stumbled back, gasping for breath. They were no longer in the attic. Instead, they stood in an overgrown garden. Mist curled like ghostly fingers around skeletal trees. The air was thick and humid, cloying with the scent of decay, each breath heavy with regret. "Where are we?" Mark's voice trembled, the bravado from moments before extinguished. "I don't know." Sarah's eyes darted around. Shadows slipped between the trees, leaving her feeling exposed, vulnerable. Her heart hammered against her ribcage like a frantic prisoner. The figure stood there, no longer just an ominous silhouette. It was slender, draped in tattered remnants of what might have been a gown, skin pale and sallow. Those familiar faces twisted in delight, framed by dark tendrils that writhed and danced at a whisper. "This is your past," it hissed, pointing into the depths of the trees. "Your memories come alive here, each rooted in pain and longing." Suddenly, Sarah heard whispers. Voices twisted around her, pulling her deeper into the garden. Her breath quickened as she staggered towards the sound. "Mom?" A cold jewel of fear nestled deep in her chest. The voice was unmistakable, sweet like sunlight through fall leaves. She could see flickering images among the branches, her mother, full of laughter, warm and inviting. Sarah, the image was intoxicating, drawing her. But before she could reach it, the creature blocked her path. "You cannot shop for memories, little girl. You must harvest what you've buried." Mark pulled her back. "Don't listen to it. It's trying to twist your memories. You have to fight this." The air crackled with tension, making the hairs on the back of her neck stand tall. "But it feels so real," she replied, eyes locked on the vision of her mother. "What if I can see her? Just one more moment." "No. You can't." Mark shouted, panic etching his voice. Torn, she closed her eyes, but the images burned bright against her eyelids. She inhaled deeply, grounding herself with Mark's comforting presence. The garden pulsed with energy, twisting into dark smiles, hungry for her compliance. "Every choice has a cost," the figure seethed. "Embrace what is hidden, and you may break free. Resist, and I will feast on your sorrow." In that moment, Sarah felt a sharp coldness, a blade of realization that cut deeper than any knife. Behind the haunted memories lay something darker, buried and festering. She had not run from just past sorrows, she had hidden from truths that surged through her veins. Suddenly, a chilling wind knocked against them. The shadows crept closer, whispering her name in 100 twisted tones. Mark's grip tightened painfully as he shouted, "We need to find a way out now. Together. We must face it together." They took a step back, hearts racing as the garden erupted around them, trees bending and groaning, shadows clawing to reveal horrors waiting to be unleashed. But Sarah, for the first time, turned to face her memories, determined to confront the truth buried within. Just then, one of the whispers rose above the rest, commanding and terrifying. "Find the heart of the garden." "What does that mean?" Mark gasped, wide-eyed. "I don't know," Sarah replied, her voice shaking. "But we have no choice." As they wove deeper into the garden, the shadows began to writhe in a frenzy, pulsating as if alive. A flicker somewhere ahead caught her eye, a faint glow among the gnarled roots of a massive tree. "Is that it?" Mark pointed, but doubt and desperation tangled his words. Sarah drew a breath and took a step forward, ready to face whatever was waiting for them beneath the surface. The garden moaned, the entity chuckled, promising the unveiling of secrets long hidden. "Whatever it is, we're in this together." "Together." Mark echoed, but the shadow behind them seemed to grow larger, an insatiable beast preparing to pounce. The shadows twisted, and they pressed on, every step echoing with dread. Would they unveil the heart of the garden and risk their sanity? Or would they be consumed by the very memories they tried to escape? With every heartbeat, they moved closer to the dark secret nestled among the roots. The glow pulsed, rhythmic and eerie, like a heartbeat trapped in the clutches of despair. Sarah's instincts screamed at her to turn away, but the promise of revelation urged her closer. The dark tendrils hissed, the promise of what lay ahead both intoxicating and terrifying. Stay close, she whispered to Mark, though they both knew that safety felt like a fading memory. As they approached the massive tree, the roots jutted out like skeletal fingers clawing at the earth. The light shimmered at its base, a sliver of something: hope, fear, or perhaps something far worse. Shadows flickered in the corners of her vision like warning signs. Mark's pulse echoed the trepidation she felt. "What do you think is down there?" His voice cracked, mixing dread with curiosity. "I don't know," Sarah replied, her breath shallow. The memories swirling inside her felt weighty, they tugged at her heart, refusing to let go. "But whatever it is, we need to uncover it. It's the only way we can escape." The laughter of the figure slithered around them, a cruel serenade. "Uncover, little ones. Dig deep, and the truth shall set you free, or perhaps it will entangle you further, binding you to this garden forever." Mark clenched his fists. "Don't listen to it. We have to focus." But the whispers intensified, a chaotic chorus of half-remembered conversations, each tainted with despair. It was all so familiar, and it made her skin crawl. Faces from her past flickered like flames in the wind, their expressions twisted, almost mocking. "Sarah. Come play." A child's voice lilted, grating on her nerves. "Just let go, join us." Her heart sank. Was it her little brother? She hadn't thought about him in years. The ache of loss tightened her throat. "No," she chanted softly like a prayer, fighting against the lure of those voices. "This isn't real." The shadows danced and writhed as she knelt to the ground, brushing away damp leaves and dirt to expose the glowing source of the light. What lay beneath was not a treasure but a writhing mass of darkness, coiling like serpents, whispering all her insecurities and fears back at her. "Face it." The figure's voice rang in her ears, a cacophony of the past merging with the present. "Face what you've buried." Suddenly, Mark darted forward, his hands clutching a jagged piece of wood. The shadows shrieked, recoiling from him, their hunger momentarily disrupted. "Get away from her!" he shouted, swinging the wood as if striking at the shadows themselves. But the glow intensified, and from the depths of the obscurity, forms began to emerge, shifting and swirling. Shapes twisted, turning corporeal, faces half seen, recognizing and condemning. She clutched her head, struggling against the rush of memories, the battles she thought she'd won rising up once more. "Mark, help!" She gasped as she felt the weight of them drawing her under, creeping ever closer. "I'm right here," he yelled, his voice a lifeline in the chaos. "We're going to break this." The ground shuddered, a moan escaping the earth as tendrils snaked toward them, hungry for their dread, craving their despair. Sarah couldn't tell where the whispers ended and her thoughts began. "Mark, it wants us to doubt. We can't hold on to me." His scream pierced through the murmurs, his grip tightening around her wrist. In a moment of clarity amidst the growing turmoil, she felt the electric bond of their unity. Together, she breathed, pushing back against the darkness, focusing every ounce of love and regret into that one word. The roots suddenly curled, trembling as if in response to her resolve. "Together!" Mark echoed loudly, and the shadows shrieked, a cacophony of desperation. With renewed strength, they grasped the edge of nightmares. The whispers frayed as they pulled free of the chilling grasp of the garden. But just as they felt a flicker of hope, a twin-edged question wormed its way into her mind: what if confronting the truth led to something far worse? Before they could implement their escape, the ground beneath them began to tremble violently, a warning that echoed through the depths of the garden. They pressed forward, but the path twisted as though the garden itself were resisting their every move. "Run!" Mark shouted, and they sprinted, but the shadows chased, the entity's laughter ringing hollow in their ears, but the light flickered in the distance, the heart of the garden pulsating as their only chance. "Will it be the salvation we seek or our destruction?" Sarah gasped as they barreled forward, their hearts racing in time with the rushing darkness behind them. Behind them, the shadows began to reshape into a figure, one that was almost too familiar. As she turned her head just for a moment, freeze-tinged dread washed over her. "Who is that?" Mark barely managed to breathe, his voice thick with terror. And that was the last question she wanted to face as they plunged deeper into the shadows. The figure loomed, indistinct at first, but Sarah's heart raced as recognition clawed at her consciousness. No, it couldn't be, but the way the shadows clung to it, how it seemed to pulse with malevolence, sent chills down her spine. "Mark!" she hissed, terror squeezing her lungs, blocking out any semblance of rational thought. "Don't look back." But the urge to turn was too great. Mark faltered just for a second, enough that the figure solidified, breaking free from the darkness in a flurry of anguished faces, twisted features begging for release. "Sarah," the voice crooned, heavy with a long-lost tenderness. "Don't you remember me?" The past flooded back like a tide, dragging her under. It was her mother, the warmth and safety of sweet memories now tainted by the deep shadows of regret. "No, this can't be real," she screamed, her voice cracking as despair settled over her like a shroud. "Come home, my dear." The figure stretched a spectral hand toward her, its touch a deceptive lure. Tendrils of fear wrapped around Sarah's heart as the shadows shifted, creating a cacophony of haunting memories. She saw herself as a child, small and vulnerable, lost in a world that had once been filled with laughter. It clawed at her mind, trying to draw her back. "No. Not again." Mark's voice broke her reverie. Gripping her wrist tighter, he pulled her back into motion, but the very air thickened with sorrow, each step heavier than the last. The tree's glow became their beacon, pulsing with frantic urgency. "Almost there," Mark urged, his breath ragged, but the shadows shifted again, swirling like a storm. They were closing in, every whispered memory accusing, every regret sharpening into painful clarity. "Leave!" the figure wailed, desperation turning the comforting tones into something raw and twisted. "Leave me, leave us. What do you want?" Sarah shouted, her voice trembling. "We just want to get out." "Freedom comes at a price." The figure's voice slithered away, echoing in their minds like an unending nightmare. It threw visions of failures and fears in their path, a dark reflection of their own inadequacies. Mark tightened his grip, his strength grounding her. "Together, remember?" he urged. Each desperate step conjured more faces, more voices. Laughter turned to cries, echoes of people they once knew surrounded them. Their pleas merging into a chilling symphony, desperate for salvation and steeped in despair. Suddenly, the ground lurched violently beneath them, the roots of the tree writhing as if alive. They stumbled, losing their footing. "Get up!" Mark shouted, panic screaming in his eyes as he pulled her back to her feet. Bright light suddenly burst from the tree's base, illuminating their path like dawn breaking through a storm. But the shadows shrieked in protest. The world twisted, shifting as the garden seemed to come alive, branches stretching and bending to trap them. "It's feeding off our fear," she realized, chills racing down her spine. Desperation settled deep in her bones, as memories clawed at the edges of her mind, threatening to swallow her whole. "Fight it!" Mark cried, his voice fierce, cutting through the tempest of despair. They pressed forward, pushing against the darkness together. "Believe in us!" Sarah shouted into the heavy air, summoning every ounce of defiance she had. But their cries only seemed to fuel the shadows. The ground beneath them began to crack, a chasm of darkness threatening to pull them in. She felt the tendrils reach, cold fingers brushing against her ankles, sinking deep. "Mark, I can't," she gasped, feeling herself slipping again, the weight of regret dragging her down into despair. "Hold on." He seized her waist, pulling her back from the abyss. But even as he did, she could hear the laughter morphing into a sickening lullaby, the darkness undulating around them like a grotesque dance of terror. The path to the light narrowed, flickering like a dying star. "Just a bit further," Mark urged, fighting against exhaustion and fear. But as they neared the glow, a fierce wind howled, ripping at their very souls. The shadows receded, only to expand wildly, morphing into a new, more horrific shape overhead. The figure transformed, its features sharp and distorted, merging Sarah's past failures into one grotesque mockery. "Why do you run from me?" it taunted, its voice layered with pain. "You cannot escape this." And with one last desperate surge, they lunged for the light, the shadows clawing at their heels. Together, they screamed in unison, heartbeat racing as the darkness lunged. What awaited them, just beyond the light? Would it be freedom, or was this the end, a deeper entrapment in the garden's grasp? The answer hung ominously in the air as they crossed the threshold. They burst through the light, tumbling into a new realm that wasn't quite right. The air felt different, thicker, almost syrupy, and the familiar chill of dread still clung to their skin. They scrambled to their feet, shock mingling with relief, but it didn't last long. "Where are we?" Mark panted, glancing around. The landscape was a distorted version of the garden they just escaped, colors were muted and everything felt wrong. The trees loomed tall, but their branches twisted grotesquely, like talons reaching out to snatch them back. "I don't know," Sarah whispered, attempting to catch her breath. "But we're not safe yet." They cautiously walked forward, hesitant about what lay ahead. Whispers echoed eerily, words they couldn't quite grasp. Shadows slinked between the trees, more agile than before, as if alive with their own unspeakable intent. The laughter had morphed, becoming hollow and disembodied, rattling around them like a chorus of lost souls. "Sarah, behind you!" Mark's warning broke through the chill. She spun around, heart racing as a shadow darted away, just out of reach. "Did you see that?" She felt panic swell inside her. "What was that?" "It's them," he said, eyes wide. "It's the ones we." She clamped a hand over his mouth, silencing him. Staring at the shadows dancing in the edges of their vision, dread rippled through her stomach. "Don't say their names. We might provoke." Her words trailed off as the shadows drew closer, hungry and relentless. A flicker of movement caught her eye, something darting between the trees. "We need to find a way out of here, Mark." They took off at a sprint, guided by the instinct that screamed at them to run. The shadows followed, whispering vile threats. "You won't be able to escape again." Each word slithered like a snake into their minds, coiling tightly around their consciousness. As they raced through the darkened forest, they spotted an old cabin off in the distance. Despair clung to them, but hope sparked at the thought of shelter. "Head for that!" Mark yelled, breaking into a frantic dash. They reached the cabin just as the shadows began to close in. The door creaked open, revealing dust motes dancing in the air, as if taunting them. "Quick!" Sarah urged, diving inside. The moment they crossed the threshold, the door slammed shut behind them, sealing them in darkness. They were enveloped in silence broken only by their ragged breaths. "Did we make it?" Mark's voice trembled. "Not yet." She adjusted her eyes to the gloom, scanning the room. A single window cast moonlight across an ancient table, covered in layers of dust and familiar items. Pictures of her family, long past but never forgotten, filled the edges of the dark wooden frame. Mark's voice wavered as he stepped closer, reaching for a photograph. "What is this doing here?" Those are from my childhood." The weight of nostalgia strangled her, twisting memories and regret tighter around her heart. "Why would they be here?" She whispered, dread pooling in her stomach. The walls began to moan as if responding to their presence. The photos twitched on their own, faces painfully distorted. "Let us out," they cried, voices overlapping like a chorus of anguish. All familiar faces warped into something grotesque, and terror flared anew. Mark's eyes were wide with horror. "It's a trap. We allowed ourselves back in." A gust swept through the cabin, rattling the windows, and the shadows of their past flickered into view, writhing like serpents. You cannot escape what you've caused. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed. The door swung open with a mind of its own, revealing a corridor leading deeper into darkness. We have to go, now. With no time to think, Sarah grabbed Mark's hand, their feet pounding against the floor as they dashed down the hall lined with shadows reaching for them. As they fled, the cabin morphed, twisting like a living thing, the walls squeezing in closer. Were they even still together? Could they escape each piece of their haunted past? They reached a door at the end of the corridor, the shadows laughing tauntingly behind them. You'll never be free. Mark pushed open the door, revealing an endless abyss. There was no way out, only darkness. Do we jump? Sarah asked, fear lacing her words. Together, he replied, gripping her hand tighter. They looked at each other, a heavy understanding combining strength still wavering. They took a breath, and just as the shadows lunged, they stepped forward into the void. What awaited them on the other side? Would they find release or become just another shadow in a tale long told? They fell through the darkness, the sensation of weightlessness twisting into an agonizing fear. They landed not with a thud, but with a sickening squelch, as if they had plunged into wet concrete. Confused and disoriented, Sarah blinked against a dim light that began to seep into view, revealing the grotesque outline of their surroundings. Where are we now? Mark groaned, pushing himself up. His hands slipped on a wet, textured surface that pulsed beneath him. Panic swelled in Sarah's chest. Get up. It's hard to breathe. She shouted, waving her arms, desperately searching for something solid. As they scrambled to their feet, the contours of the world around them came into focus, a dilapidated room with walls pulsating softly, as if it were alive. The air was thick, flavored with rot and despair. Rust-red stains trickled down the walls like the remnants of past horrors. Is that blood? Mark stammered. His eyes darted around, and the shadows from their previous chase clung to the walls, contorting into the shapes of lost souls. Yes. We need to find a way out. Sarah shouted, dread gripping her heart. She noticed a door at the far end of the room tightly sealed but emitting a faint light. They rushed towards it, but as they drew closer, the door began to groan and warp, as if it were made of flesh, not wood. Step back. Mark yelled just as a misshapen hand erupted through the door, grasping for them, claw-like fingers reaching out with a grotesque slowness. Run. Without hesitation, Sarah shoved Mark back, but as they dodged away, the room shifted once again, causing them to stumble. They crashed into the walls, the wet surface oozed and pulsed against their skin. Where do we go? Mark yelled, his voice thick with panic. Follow the light. Sarah pointed to a glow seeping from the cracks beneath another door across the room. They dashed towards it, the sinister hand still clawing, pulling, dragging itself from the door behind them. They reached the new door, desperately pushing against it, but it held firm. Shadows snarled and hissed from behind, the air thickening with whispers of betrayal and regret. You think you can escape the past? They taunted. Mark on 3. Sarah counted off, bracing her shoulder against the door. 1, 2, 3. They slammed into the door and it splintered away, revealing an exit leading into a fog-laden woods, trees closing in like teeth of a mouth ready to swallow them whole. Go, go. Mark pulled her forward as they dashed through, but as they crossed the threshold, the ground beneath them trembled, the roots grasping at their ankles like skeletal fingers. Keep running. She shouted, her heart racing against the oppressive weight of the shadows still lingering at the edge, just out of sight. Every rustle in the underbrush felt alive, a predator stalking them waiting. As they broke from the tree line, they spotted an old car, rusted and abandoned. We can use this. Mark shouted, his eyes reflecting a glimmer of hope. They barreled toward it, barbed wire twisting around the dilapidated vehicle like a warning, but they didn't stop. Please start, Sarah prayed, fumbling with the door handle. To her relief, it sprang open, and they clambered inside. Mark slid into the driver's seat, his fingers darting across the controls. The engine sputtered. Hope surged, but it quickly faded as it died again. No, no, no. Come on. Mark slammed his fist against the dashboard, panic swirling in his eyes. Suddenly, a deafening crack echoed from the trees as something monstrous burst through the underbrush, massive and shadowed. Heartbeats thundered in their ears, echoing the predator's heavy breathing. Get us out of here. Sarah screamed. Just then, the shadows swelled and rushed toward the car, clawing, raging, intent on pulling them back into the horror they thought they had escaped. The engine roared to life, vibrating with a desperate energy. Hold on. Mark shouted as he slammed the gas pedal to the floor. The car lurched forward into the night, but would it be enough? The figure in the trees loomed closer, an unfathomable malice racing after them. The shadows reached for the car, fingers stretching out, threatening to drag them down into darkness again. Would they finally break free, or was this just the beginning of a nightmare that would follow them forever? Turn left. Sarah screamed as they raced towards the highway. She could hear the cacophony of screams, the souls they had left behind. Would the road lead them back to safety, or further into the depths of their own chaos? They were racing against time, but it felt like the shadows were closing in faster than they could flee. The tires screeched against the wet pavement as Mark veered left, the world outside a blur of darkness and fleeting glimpses of trees, their branches twisting like gnarled fingers clawing at the sky. Sarah's breath was shallow, a raw sound filling the cramped space as adrenaline waged war against the panic in her chest. Faster. She urged, her voice trembling. They're right behind us. The interior of the car was a cauldron of fear. Mark's eyes darted to the rearview mirror, and his face went pale. Oh God, they're coming. He gasped. A shadow rippled like a dark wave, pouring from the woods and breaking onto the road behind them. It surged, morphing into multiple forms, faces twisted in anguish and eyes wide with desperation, reaching for them. Sarah felt their cold breath on her neck, the shadows hungry for a taste of dread. Drive. She screamed. Don't look back. The engine roared, a desperate cry for survival. Mark pushed the pedal down harder, the car lunging forward as if it were alive, fighting against the malevolence chasing them. But with every heartbeat, the darkness seemed closer, curling around them like thick smoke. Just ahead, the road forked. One path led deeper into the woods, dark and foreboding, the other opened into a clearing bathed in sickly moonlight. Which way? Mark yelled, panic distorting his features. Into the light. Sarah shouted, pointing to the clearing, praying it would lead to salvation. They skidded onto the path, the tires fighting for grip on the damp ground. The shadows let out a wail, a sound that sliced through the air, chilling Sarah to her core. They were losing ground, but she could feel something else in the clearing, an unsettling stillness, an ominous anticipation. What if that's a trap? A voice in her head warned, but that thought vanished as they burst into the light. The clearing opened up, revealing an eerie tranquility. An abandoned house loomed in the center, its windows shattered and doors hanging ajar like broken teeth. The light seemed to emanate from within, flickering in a hypnotic dance. It's just an old house, we can hide there. Mark suggested, searching for any spark of hope in the chaos. Are you crazy? It's probably worse than the woods. Sarah replied, her voice shaking. But the howl of the shadows grew louder, relentless. They clung to the edges of the clearing, waiting with wicked patience. Mark was already making his way towards the house, and Sarah was left with a choice: face the lurking horrors or succumb to something far darker closing in on them. Mark, wait! She yelled, but he had already crossed the threshold, disappearing into the shadowy interior. With each step into the house, the air thickened, the light flickering and dimming like a dying heartbeat. The whispers intensified, wrapping around her, crawling beneath her skin. She stepped over the threshold, her heart pounding violently against her ribs, her body flooded with cold dread. Inside, the floorboards creaked under her weight, echoing like a warning. Shadows danced on the walls, grotesque figures twisting into familiar shapes, faces of friends they had lost along the way. Images of the chase flooded her mind, raw and unfiltered. "Mark!" she called, her voice swallowed by the gloom. But the silence felt heavy, pressing against her ears. She stepped further inside, the flickering light casting unsettling shapes around her, faces pleading, shadows reaching. What had they stumbled into? A figure materialized from the shadows, a woman, her eyes hollow, skin pale as moonlight. "You shouldn't have come here," the woman whispered, her voice like brittle leaves rustling in the wind. The shadows inched closer, ready to consume everything in their wake. "Mark! Get out! We have to go!" Sarah shouted, her voice breaking, but was there a way out? As the shadows thickened around them, Sarah felt the ground pulse beneath her feet, alive with anticipation. If they couldn't escape this, what would happen next? Would they join the tortured souls, or could they fight back against the night? Darkness swelled, cold tendrils creeping up her body, and she knew one thing was certain: the true horror was just beginning. "Mark!" she yelled again, but the air thickened, twisting her voice into something unrecognizable. Just then, a soft glow flickered to life in the corner of the room, a doorway barely visible through the shadows. Was it a way out or just another trap? Before she could decide, the darkness surged toward her, forcing her to take a step forward. Would she dare to find out? As Sarah staggered toward the flickering glow, fear gripping her heart, she felt the shadows lunge behind her. Panic surged. There was no turning back, the darkness wouldn't allow it. Mark's safety was slipping away, and the chilling weight of helplessness clawed at her throat. "I'm coming!" she screamed, her voice a raw battle cry against the encroaching night, her determination flaring like a beacon. Rushing through the doorway, Sarah was met with a blinding light. It enveloped her, warm and inviting. She stumbled forward, squeezing her eyes shut against the brightness, feeling the shadows recoil, shrieking in agony at the light's intrusion. When the radiance finally faded, she found herself in a stark white room, completely empty except for a lone mirror hanging on the wall. The reflective surface shimmered, inviting her closer, like a portal promising answers. "Sarah!" Mark's voice echoed from behind her. Relief flooded her, but it was immediately drowned by urgency. The shadows were still pursuing him. "Mark! In here!" she shouted, gesturing wildly toward the mirror. "Hurry!" She felt the tremors of panic beneath her skin as he hurtled into the room, eyes wide with fear. He rushed to her side as the shadows banged against the door, rattling it violently. There was a moment of hesitation before he stepped toward the mirror. "What's happening?" he asked, breathless. "I don't know, but I think it could help us." She glanced back at the door, bracing for what might come next. The surface of the mirror began to ripple, revealing a swirling mass of memories, images of laughter, stolen moments, and heartbreak swirled together in a confusing tableau. Faces from their past, both joyful and tragic, appeared before her. "They're trying to draw us back," he whispered, horrified. "They want us to relive our worst moments." "No," Sarah shook her head firmly, refusing to surrender to the past. "We must confront this. We have to understand what lies beneath," she proclaimed, stepping closer to the mirror, the light intensifying as she approached it. Mark grabbed her arm, panic flashing in his eyes. "What if it traps us in there?" "We don't have a choice," she replied, her heart racing. "This is our chance. Together." Taking a deep breath, they locked eyes, an unspoken understanding passing between them. They were in this together. With that, they turned toward the swirling reflection side by side and stepped through the mirror. The world shifted dramatically, blinding light enveloping them once more before fading to reveal a familiar scene. They stood in a bustling park, sunlight streaming through the leaves, children laughing and playing. It was Sarah's childhood, a vibrant tableau alive with innocent joy, but something was different. A pervasive darkness lingered at the edges of the scene, whispers lurking beneath the joyous laughter, tainting the laughter with buried sorrow. Sarah felt a surge of nostalgia mixed with dread as images from her past flickered painfully. "Are you ready?" she asked, her voice steady despite the turbulence inside. Mark nodded grimly. "We face this together." They walked further into the scene, avoiding the biting shadows that pulsed just out of view. With each step, Sarah felt fragments of her past push through the happiness layered with grief, memories shrouded in guilt. Suddenly, they stood by a playground swing. A little girl sat there, tiny and delicate, her laughter ringing in the air. "Sarah!" she called, looking directly at her. Heart racing, Sarah recognized the face her younger self. "No, I can't." Without warning, the shadows lashed out, clawing desperately at Sarah's younger form. "Help me!" the little girl cried, her voice torn and breaking. "Mark, we can't let them harm her." Without even thinking, Sarah dove toward her past self, reaching out, but the darkness clamped down, trying to twist her spirit, dragging her back into a labyrinth of despair. "Hold on!" Mark shouted, gripping Sarah's waist even as the shadows lashed out at him too. They pressed together, focusing on their love, a tether pulling them back from the brink. "You will never escape." The shadows hissed, the air thickening with the weight of regret and sorrow, trembling with an energy that felt ancient and powerful. "No!" Sarah shouted, her voice ringing with defiance. "We will break this cycle." Drawing on the shared strength surging between them, Sarah focused on her younger self, their eyes locking. "You are loved. You are more than your fears. We won't let them take you." The shadows shrieked, melting back, their hold trembling. The little girl looked up, confusion giving way to clarity as recognition flickered in her eyes. With a final push, the light exploded around them, blinding and consuming. When the brightness faded, they stood in the same room they had first entered, the mirror shattered beside them. "We did it," Mark breathed, his eyes wide. "Yes," Sarah whispered, tears streaming down her cheeks. They had faced their shadows, confronted their past, and emerged victorious, but as they turned to leave, the room shifted one last time, reforming into the eerie garden they had once fled. The shadows loomed, but this time, they seemed smaller, vulnerable, like an echo of what they had faced before. "This time, we won't back down," Mark declared fiercely, gripping her hand. Sarah nodded, resolve flooding her chest. The darkness surrounding them quivered, but as long as they stood together, the shadows had no power. "Let us go home," Sarah said, pulling Mark forward as the garden began to fade. And this time, they ran toward the light. The brightness enveloped them once again, and as they stepped through, a hush fell over the darkness, an understanding settling quietly. The shadows no longer had a claim. As the world brightened, Sarah felt a weight lift. She knew the shadows might linger, but they had faced their fears and emerged anew. Together, they would always find their way back to the light. Their journey might have begun in a haunted Airbnb, but it ended in a place of newfound strength, a bond forged in the fires of terror but emerging in love and resilience. So, when they stepped into the light, they knew nothing could hold them back any longer, and from the depths of the garden, silence echoed a final promise of a different story yet to be told. But this chapter was now complete. Now, before you go, this is the moment to show your support. You need to subscribe now so you don't miss the next exclusive stories. Smash that like button to feed the algorithm and keep us going. Flood the comments section with your reactions and theories about the ending. We really want to hear from you, and don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Only true fans understand the importance of supporting the channel through these actions.